Hey again, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Dr. Pat Hill here, creating the autism friendly environment. And we're on the second session on the topic of nutrition intervention. And it's been a few weeks since the last post, because it's been something I've been struggling with, trying to determine what level of depth I go into in talking about this study I did back in 2000 at the University of Washington. And I've been thinking a lot about how to present this, because having my years as a special educator with severe autism students with severe autism, uh, just reflecting back on the amount of students that did have food allergies, and just the level of importance placed on food in the school system. For example, bus pulls up in the morning, and students, we bring them to the classroom, and off we go to breakfast. Most of the students I worked with were on free and reduced lunch programs, so it was food right out of the cafeteria. And we went into that. Then we would go into activities, and lots of times those activities involved reward systems, which often involved food. And then we'd move later into lunch and more food. And then typically before getting on the bus at the end of the day, we would put some kind of snack in place, so that if they had long bus rides, they weren't going hungry on the bus. But I mean, food was just weaved in and out of the day. And all the research I've completed on nutrition for students with autism, and food allergies, just it was always something in the back of your head, like, wow, are we just sabotaging this student by the food we're putting in front of the student multiple times during the day? So I can't stress enough, it's something worth looking at. I'm not, I want to repeat, I'm not a medical doctor, but it is so worth exploring, if especially if there are known food sensitivities. Wow, what a barrier to education. Everything we learned in education about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the basic needs down at the bottom, with security and safety and food. What if we're really creating a weak foundation? It's just the entry level of everything we do. So the study, if you have any questions, I really wrestled with how deep to go into the study. Please feel free to contact me anytime. Text me 760-447-6965. Happy to answer any questions you have about any of these topics we cover. And so the study, let me just describe it a little bit. The research leading up to the study looked a lot at the genetic relationship to autism. A lot of science out there describing that there is a genetic predisposition to autism. Those are a lot of the best studies, I think, are Elderson and Shaw. Really found their studies to be very interesting. And there's a lot of research out there with food allergies, food sensitivities, and that connection to autism. Rimlin and Ackerman are the folks I would suggest exploring. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to contact me, and I could help point you in the right direction of some really good reads on those topics. So, we talked a lot about the traditional model of predisposition to autism, and then the diagnosis, the behaviors, and then the treatments. And so, it's kind of a reversal to think like, well, maybe some of those interventions should happen early on, and maybe that would help reduce the behaviors to follow, for example. So, what if there is a relationship between nutrition and behavior? That would change how we're working down the line with the students. So I'm pulling out some parts of the study that I think were really important, and one of them is the concept of serotonin. That's something that's known is that individuals with autism typically have higher levels of serotonin in their system, and that's a very interesting concept because serotonin serves a dual purpose in the body, in the body, and you have the digestive tract. It serves as a vasoconstrictor, and you're thinking about the digestive system from the mouth all the way to the bottom. That you find it just lined in there, serotonin, and it's a vasoconstrictor that inhibits gastric secretion. Okay, so that's important because if your body's not producing enough gastric output to help break down food, you can start having problems in the gut, and that's something worth exploring because something that's a bit prevalent. It's also kind of controversial in the science community, so that's something worth exploring. Judge for yourself. I'm not going to tell you if it's true or not, but I believe something's going on with digestive issues with a lot of folks with autism. Leaky gut syndrome is when you start having a breakdown of the lining in your digestive tract from your mouth all the way to the colon, and when you have a breakdown of the lining, that means that things are entering the blood system that aren't supposed to. Okay, so, and some of those things that could possibly be entering the blood system, creating some havoc, besides things that are supposed to be passed through the system and not entering the system, are things that are prevalent, like serotonin, because I mentioned it has a dual function. Serotonin is also a neurotransmitter, so it sends signals to the brain. So you've got neurotransmitters overabundance. So all heck is breaking loose, and the brain is receiving a ton of information, sensory information. So there's those correlations to consider. I'm not saying those are actual correlations, but they're potential correlations to consider. And again, I wish there was more research out there on this topic, but just the fact that there's an abundance of serotonin, more so in people with autism, that right there is justification for research. So you have leaky gut syndrome, and at the minimum it would be discomfort, just discomfort from eating, which is a barrier to education. So this study, that was just just in a nutshell, the justification for this study. This was a single subject case study, meaning there was only one student involved in the study. That's a technique used in severe and profound disabilities quite often, and because individuals are so unique when it comes to severe disabilities, that single subject case studies are often a way to start down on a path of interventions, and also used for justification for bigger studies. So I'm a big fan of just the traditional single subject case study, the A/B study. I wish it were used more often. I think it would create more meaningful studies in the field of education. But this was a typical A/B study. So what we did with this student with autism, high school student, female, ambulatory, highly verbal, physically aggressive to self and others, and strong levels of echolalia, repeating conversations. And I'm so thankful for this family to participate in the study. And so this was, you said, what we did is the A portion of the study was we were measuring for 10 minutes a day for 2 weeks. And this is the portion of the day where this student was the most active. And part of her vocational skills program was operating a paper shredder, putting in one paper at a time. And so we measured behaviors during that time every day for 2 weeks. And so then after the 2 weeks, we did the nutritional intervention for 2 weeks, and then returned to, once the student was on this diet for 2 weeks, we returned to measuring the behaviors during vocational time for another 2 weeks. And it was pretty interesting. So remember, those are 10-minute periods. The student liked to rehearse questions. She would ask questions consistently, even though she knew the answer to it, probably wanted to hear the answer from the individual. So during the A portion of the study, during that period of 10 minutes, she would ask the same question 9.4 times. And then during the B portion, after she went through the nutritional intervention, she was asking the same question 2.45 times. There was significant increases in eye contact during the B portion of the study. And then she would also, when she wasn't asking questions, she was typically engaging in echolalia, reciting conversations that she's heard in the past. In the A portion, she would spend 5.5 minutes rehearsing conversations or repeating conversations that she heard. And then during the B portion, that dropped to 1 minute and 42 seconds on average. Self-abuse. She would do a lot of scraping of her arms and her face, and picking at wounds, just kind of suggesting an escalated state for the student. And the student was averaging 2.13 incidents of self-abuse during the A portion of the study, and during the B portion of the study, that dropped to 0.89. So actually dropped under one incident during that time. So I'm sorry, 0.67, not 0.89. And one interesting side note is she had acne, um, and during the B portion of the study, the acne actually cleared up quite a bit. So that could have that could be totally unrelated. It could have to do with hormones and cycles, but that was an interesting little side note of the study, was the complexion change, and the a lot of the wounds were starting to heal. Um, Work productivity. This was the interesting one. That was a surprise in the study where work productivity actually went down. Um, she was in the A portion. She was doing 138 sheets of paper during that 10-minute period, and that dropped to 89. Um, so it was interesting. She was a little bit less focused on. She would kind of get into a rhythm um, before we did the intervention, and there was a lot more going on. During the B portion, she was, rather than asking the same questions over and over again, as part of that kind of rhythm, and the rhythm she'd get into with the echolalia, she was stopping more, and that was something we should have studied. Something we should have measured was uh, the variance in questions, because she started asking different kinds of questions during the B rather than the same questions over and over again. So she was, which I think that's in a way is a positive change, that even though her work productivity went down, her conversations with the people around her became more meaningful during that time. So work went down, but social skills kind of went up. Interestingly enough. So I think that's all I'm going to say on the study. It was such an interesting study. Um, if anybody's interested in studying this topic more, I'd love to talk to them. It's Pat Hill, 760-447-6965. Feel free to text or call me anytime. And so with that said, if you're caring for somebody with autism, if you're a person with autism, and you think that something's up with food, the individual feels poor, just feels awful after they eat, lots of indigestion, diarrhea, bloating, belching, passing gas, all those things. If that's prevalent, it might have a lot to do with what is being ingested. That's not a medical opinion, that's just common sense. And which common sense would tell you that it's worth checking out, and not something we just accept, because that's something that as humans we tend to do. Someone might say, oh yeah, digestive issues are real common with people with autism, and then saying that's just the way it is, and really no, it's not okay. It's not the way it is. It's something that needs to be addressed, because that's a quality of life thing for people with autism. So if there are issues there, check it out and keep plugging away at it until it gets resolved. And that's just my personal take, because not only is it the well-being and the enjoyment of life. If you're eating things that are making you miserable, that needs to change. And just from an education perspective, as a professional, if things are being eaten that are getting in the way of education, we wouldn't encourage our kids to come to school after drinking alcohol, for example, because it would be a barrier to education. So, if we're eating things that are making the individual feel bad, that's going to get in the way of education. And you got to have the right environment when it comes to education. So thanks for listening to this. I wanted to put this more at the front end before we start moving into the checklist, because it's something that I'm very passionate about, and it's just one of those basics that, before you even move into the checklist, in my personal opinion, is if this is up there as something that might apply, it's worth doing, front load it, because the other checklist items might be being sabotaged by this topic. So thanks again for listening. Again, please contact me if you have any questions. Always excited to help in any way I can, from my years experience in research and being a professional with autism. Alrighty, hope you have a great day. Thank you.